She walked through the silent halls of her palace, her steps echoing like whispers in the dark. Her name was Serenia, daughter of the High Council, and heir to a race that lived far from the human worlds. To her people, she was a symbol of strength. To herself, she was the voice of bitterness. Serenia despised humanity. She had never trusted them, never wanted to see their faces, never wanted to hear their words. To her, humans were destroyers. They were the ones who poisoned planets, started wars, and left scars on galaxies. In her heart, there was no room for forgiveness. The stars outside her window glittered coldly. She remembered the stories her elders told her. Humans came once to her world centuries ago, promising friendship, but friendship had turned into betrayal. Her people had lost lives, families had been destroyed. That pain lived in her blood like fire. Humans cannot be trusted, she whispered to herself. Her voice was sharp, heavy with anger. The guards who stood by the doors lowered their eyes. They had heard her say those words countless times, and they believed them, for their princess carried the truth of history. Still, there was something strange in Serenia's heart. At night, when silence filled her chambers, she wondered why the universe kept pushing humans back into their lives. If they were so dangerous, why did fate keep throwing them into her path? The council chamber was filled with voices. Her father spoke of the growing dangers in space, pirate fleets, unknown enemies, and scattered whispers of shadows moving in the void. Serenia listened, her eyes sharp, but her father's words ended with something she hated. The humans are reaching closer to our borders again, he said. We must decide how to respond. Her hands tightened into fists. Respond? We should drive them away. Burn their ships if we must. We do not need them. The elders nodded. Some agreed with her. Others feared her sharpness. Her father looked at her, calm but firm. Hatred blinds us, daughter, he said. Do not forget, enemies may come from places beyond humanity. But Serenia shook her head. Her hatred was old, carved deep. It was not easy to break. Later that night, she walked through the gardens under the artificial starlight. The air was soft, the flowers glowing faintly blue. But even here, her thoughts were heavy. She remembered her mother. Gone in the war that humans had sparked, she remembered the cries of the children, left behind when villages were burned. To her, humanity was nothing but a shadow that poisoned every memory. Yet, fate was cruel. On that very night, alarms rang across the palace. Red lights lit the skies. The guards rushed, and Serenia's sharp eyes turned upward. A single human ship had been captured in orbit, dragged by their patrol fleet. The prisoner was alive, a human male, brought down in chains. His ship was broken, his body bruised. Yet even in pain, he walked with his head held high. Serenia's heart filled with fire. She had waited her whole life to look into the eyes of the enemy, and now, fate had given her that chance. She stepped forward, her voice cold as steel. Bring him to me, she commanded. The guards obeyed. The human looked at her, tired but unbroken. For the first time in her life, Serenia felt something she had never expected. It was not pity. It was not anger. It was curiosity. Why did his eyes hold no fear? Why did he not beg, like others did? Her story of hatred had begun long ago. But tonight, under the watch of stars and chains, a new story was about to start, one that would test everything she believed, one that would change her forever. The council chamber was silent when the human was brought in. His hands were bound in glowing chains, his uniform torn and stained with blood. The guards pushed him forward, but he did not stumble. His back remained straight, his eyes sharp. Serenia watched from her throne, her gaze cold. She had seen prisoners before, but this one was different. Most enemies cried or cursed when brought before her. Yet this human looked straight into her eyes, as if he feared nothing. Name, Serenia demanded, her voice echoing through the chamber. The man's lips curled into a faint smile. Captain Elias Kane, he said. His voice was steady, calm like still water. Serenia narrowed her eyes. She expected arrogance. She expected lies. But his voice carried neither. Instead, it carried a strange strength, the kind she had not heard in years. The council elders whispered among themselves. Some demanded his execution. Others suggested keeping him for information. Serenia listened, but her heart burned with hatred. "You should not be alive," she said, her words sharp as a blade. "Your kind destroyed worlds. Why should I let you breathe the air of mine?" Elias tilted his head slightly. His eyes never left hers. "Because not all of us are what you believe," he answered, "and because your enemies are not only human." The chamber erupted in anger. The elders shouted. The guards moved closer, but Serenia raised her hand, silencing them. She studied the man, her eyes hard. "You think you can fool me with pretty words?" she hissed. "Humans are liars, traitors, killers." Elias did not flinch, and yet here I stand, not begging for my life, not asking for mercy, he said. "I stand here because my ship was attacked, not by your people, but by something else in the void." The words hit the chamber like a spark. The elders froze, whispering again. Serenia's jaw tightened. She wanted to dismiss him, but something in his tone caught her attention. He spoke not like a coward, but like a soldier who had seen too much. She rose from her throne, her tall figure casting a shadow over him. "You will speak," she ordered. "Tell us who attacked you." Elias's expression darkened. His voice grew heavy. "They are not human," he said. "They are not from any empire you know. They come from beyond the mapped stars. Shadows with no faces. They strike fast. They leave nothing behind." The silence in the chamber grew heavier. Serenia's mind raced. Could this be true? Or was it another human trick to turn their attention away? She turned her back on him, pacing slowly. "Why should we believe you?" she asked. "Why would a human warn us of anything?" Elias's voice cut through the silence, firm and unshaken. "Because when they come, they will not care if you are human or not. They will destroy everything." For a moment, Serenia felt the weight of his words. It was strange to feel even a drop of doubt in her ocean of hatred, but she pushed it aside. "Lock him away," she commanded. "If his words are true, we will see the proof soon enough." The guards dragged him out, chains rattling. Yet even as he was taken, his eyes never looked away from hers. That calm strength disturbed her, more than she wanted to admit. Later, in the silence of her chambers, Serenia stood by her window, staring at the stars. She thought of his eyes, his words, the fire in his voice. Why did he not beg? Why did he not curse? Why did he stand with such strange dignity, even as a prisoner? The hatred in her heart whispered its old truths. Humans were evil, not to be trusted, yet deep inside, another voice whispered something else. What if just this once she was wrong? Outside, in the dark cells below, Elias sat alone. His body ached, but his spirit did not bend. He knew he was surrounded by enemies. Yet he also knew something they did not. The shadows were coming. And when they did, even the alien princess who despised him would learn the truth. For fate had already begun weaving their stories together, and neither hatred nor chains would stop what was coming. The palace walls shook with a sudden roar. Sirens wailed. Lights flashed crimson across the city, and soldiers rushed into formation. Serenia stood in the council chamber when the alarms rang, her heart pounding in her chest. "Enemy fleet detected," a guard shouted, his voice sharp with fear. "They came out of the void. Unknown signatures. They are not ours." The elders gasped, their faces pale. Serenia's father rose from his chair, his voice steady but grim. "Prepare defenses, all ships to their stations." Serenia's eyes narrowed. The words of the human prisoner echoed in her mind. Shadows with no faces, they will destroy everything. For a moment, her anger clashed with a strange unease. Could Elias have been telling the truth? The chamber doors burst open. Another soldier rushed inside. "Highness, they are attacking our outposts. Our patrol ships are being destroyed. Their weapons cut through shields like fire, through paper." The room filled with chaos. Elders shouting commands, fear spreading like wildfire. Serenia clenched her fists. Her people were strong, but this enemy was something else. She turned to her father. "We must act now. If these are the shadows he spoke of, then we are already in danger." Her father's eyes searched hers, and though he had once told her hatred could blind, Even he could not deny the fear spreading through their ranks. Meanwhile, deep below in the prison cells, Elias Kane lifted his head as the alarm screamed. He closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "They're here." He had warned them, and now the galaxy had brought proof. The guards around him looked nervous. Some ran to the surface, leaving their posts. The human sat still, his chains heavy, but his spirit calm. He had faced them before. He knew the sound of their ships, the hum of their weapons, the silence that followed when entire fleets disappeared. Above, Serenia rushed to the war balcony. From there, she could see the dark horizon. The stars were blotted out by shapes that seemed more like shadows than ships. They moved with unnatural speed, cutting through her fleets, explosions tearing the night apart. Her people screamed in panic. The defenses she had trusted were crumbling in minutes. She gritted her teeth. No, this cannot be real. But the fire in the skies proved it was. One of her commanders fell to his knees before her. "Princess, we cannot hold them. We are losing everything." Serenia's heart raced. In her chest, hatred and fear collided, and in the middle of that storm, one thought rose: Elias. She remembered his calm words, his warning, his unshaken gaze. He had spoken truth when she thought only of lies. "Bring the human to me," she commanded sharply. "Now." The guards hesitated, but Highness. "Now," she shouted, her voice like thunder. The soldiers obeyed, racing down to the prison cells. Moments later, Elias stood before her, still in chains, his eyes lifted to the burning sky, his jaw tightened. "I told you," he said simply. "They're not coming for me. They're coming for all of us." Serenia stared at him, her hatred trembling under the weight of reality. For the first time, she did not see just a human. She saw a soldier who had faced this nightmare before. "What do you know about them?" she asked, her voice urgent. Elias turned to her, his eyes dark. "Enough to fight, enough to survive, but only if you let me." The chamber fell silent. Everyone waited for Serenia's response. The fate of her people balanced on her decision. She looked at him, chains glinting in the red light. A man she once wished dead, now standing as the only chance for survival. Her chest tightened. The universe was cruel indeed. "Unlock him," she ordered at last. "If we are to survive, then humanity will fight beside us." The guards hesitated but obeyed. The chains fell from Elias's wrists with a heavy clatter. He rubbed his arms, his eyes steady. The alien princess who despised humanity had just chosen one to stand by her side, and the war with the shadows had only begun. The night sky burned red. Ships exploded in flames, and the city shook under the weight of war. Serenia stood at the war balcony, her eyes fixed on the endless swarm of shadow ships tearing through her fleet. Her people cried out in fear, and for the first time in her life, she felt powerless. Elias Kane stood beside her, no longer in chains, his uniform still torn, his face bruised, but his eyes steady. He looked at the chaos without fear, like a man who had seen this many times before. "You cannot defeat them with numbers," Elias said, his voice hard. "They're too fast, too strong. Their weapons are beyond your design." Serenia's jaw tightened. "Then how do we stop them?" He turned to her, his gaze sharp. "We don't stop them. We survive them. We strike where they are weak, not where they are strong." The council elders gasped at his words. Some protested. "We cannot trust him. He is human. He will betray us." But Serenia silenced them with a glare. "Enough," she said coldly. "If he wanted us dead, he would not be standing here giving us counsel." Her father, the High Council leader, studied Elias quietly, his eyes old but wise. "Sometimes survival demands strange allies," he said. "Let the human fight." Elias nodded once, then turned to Serenia. "I'll need a ship and soldiers who can follow orders without question." Serenia raised her chin. "You will have me." The words shocked the chamber. Even Elias looked at her in surprise, but Serenia did not waver. "If you know how to fight them, then I will see it with my own eyes." Within minutes, the two of them were aboard a sleek battle cruiser. The decks trembled as the ship rose into the burning sky. Soldiers looked nervously at the human among them, but Serenia's presence kept their silence. From the cockpit, Elias pointed toward the formation of shadow ships. "Do you see how they move?" "Like a single mind," he explained, "but every mind has a core, a heartbeat. If we find their control vessel, the swarm will break." Serenia studied the swarm, her alien eyes sharper than his. She scanned the dark shapes until her gaze fixed on one ship, slightly larger, its movements slower, guiding the others like a shepherd. "There," she said, pointing. Elias's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good eyes." The ship surged forward, engines roaring. The soldiers manned their stations, cannons lighting up the void, but the shadows were fast, too fast. They swarmed around them like predators circling prey. Serenia gripped the controls, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Elias stood beside her, giving commands. "Keep them on our tail. Don't let them surround us. Aim for the core ship. That's our target." The cruiser dove through the chaos, shadow beams slicing past them. The shields flickered, alarm screamed. But Serenia's focus never broke. She moved like a warrior born, every turn sharp, every strike precise. For a moment, Elias almost forgot she was the one who hated him. In her eyes burned the same fire he carried, the fire of survival. "Firing main cannon," shouted a soldier. The blast shot across the void, striking the larger ship. A crack of light spread across its surface, but it did not fall. "They're protecting it," Elias growled. "Then we break their wall." He rushed to the weapon station, his hands moving with skill. His fingers danced across controls, firing at precise points, knocking smaller ships aside, creating an opening. Serenia glanced at him, astonished at his speed. For a prisoner, for an enemy, he fought like one of her best commanders. Together, they pushed through the swarm. The cruiser shook violently, metal screaming, but finally they broke through. The core ship loomed before them, its black surface pulsing like a living heart. "Now!" Elias shouted. Serenia's eyes narrowed. She fired the main cannon again. The blast struck true. The core ship cracked open with a roar, light exploding into the void. At once, the swarm faltered. Their perfect unity broke. Shadow ships scattered wildly, crashing into each other, retreating into the darkness. The battlefield grew silent. Fire and smoke drifted across the skies. The survivors cheered, voices rising with hope. Serenia sat back in her chair, her chest heaving, her eyes turned to Elias. And for the first time, her hatred wavered. He met her gaze, calm but firm. "This is only the beginning," he said. "They will return, stronger than before." Serenia looked at him, her voice low. "Then we will fight them again." And for the first time, she did not say we as in her people alone. She said it as if humanity was part of that fight too. The victory was short-lived. Though the swarm had retreated, the sky still burned with wreckage. Serenia's cruiser limped back toward the capital city. Its hull cracked, its shields nearly gone. The people cheered from below, believing the danger was over. But Elias knew better. "They'll come again," he said, his voice grim. "That was only a fraction of their strength. Next time, they won't make the same mistake." Serenia stood beside him, her body tense. Her hatred for humanity had always felt unshakable. But now, standing near him, she felt something strange, something she could not name. He had fought with her, side by side, with no thought of betrayal. His courage was undeniable. Days passed in uneasy silence. The council argued endlessly. Some demanded that the human be executed before he turned on them. Others whispered that he was their only chance of survival. Serenia watched these debates, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking of his eyes, his voice, his calmness in battle. Late one night, she found herself walking to the medical wing where Elias rested. His wounds were shallow, but his body carried many scars, not from this battle, but from years of war. He looked up when she entered, his gaze steady. "You should hate me," he said softly. "I am human." Her jaw tightened. "I do hate you," she answered, but her voice wavered. "And yet, I cannot ignore what you have done." He gave a faint smile, one that carried no pride, only weariness. Sometimes survival requires us to fight for more than ourselves. Before she could respond, alarm screamed again, this time louder, sharper. The swarm had returned, larger than before. The skies lit with fire once more. Serenia and Elias rushed to the war balcony. The shadows poured into orbit, endless in number. Their weapons cut through defenses like paper. "They're after your city this time," Elias said, his voice firm. "They won't stop until everything is ash." Serenia clenched her fists. "Then we fight until the last breath." The battle began. Ships launched. Cannons roared. Explosions shook the ground. Serenia led her people once more into the fire, and Elias stood beside her, guiding every move. But this time, the swarm was prepared. Their ships moved faster, their weapons sharper. Every counterattack was met with overwhelming force. During the chaos, one of the shadow ships broke through the defense line, heading straight for the capital's energy core. The heart of the city, if it was destroyed, millions would die instantly. Serenia shouted orders, but the defense ships were too far. There was only one vessel close enough to intercept, the cruiser Elias stood upon. Without hesitation, Elias seized the controls. His voice rang through the comms. "I'll stop it." Serenia turned in shock. "No, you cannot." But before she could stop him, the cruiser shot forward. Engines blazing, soldiers screamed over the comms. "You'll never make it back." Elias only replied, calm and steady, "It doesn't matter. Someone has to hold the line." Serenia's heart twisted. She had hated him, despised him, wished him dead. But now, watching him fly alone into the jaws of death, she felt something she never thought possible. Fear. Fear of losing him. The shadow ship loomed ahead, its massive weapons charging. Elias pushed the cruiser harder, alarms blaring, metal groaning. He fired every cannon, every missile, tearing into the enemy vessel. The shadow ship staggered, but it did not fall. Its weapon prepared to fire at the city. Elias made his choice. His voice came through the comms one last time. "Serenia, live." Then he drove his cruiser straight into the core of the shadow ship. A massive explosion lit the skies, fire brighter than the suns themselves. The enemy vessel shattered, torn apart by the sacrifice of one man. The swarm faltered once more, retreating into the void. But Serenia did not see victory. She saw only the fire where Elias had been. Her chest ached. Her hands shook. For the first time in her life, tears burned her eyes. The human she hated had saved her people. Not once, but twice. And he had given everything to do it. Around her, her people cheered again, crying out for victory. But Serenia stood silent, her heart heavy. Hatred was easy, simple. It had fueled her for years. But now, standing in the ruins of battle, she realized something far harder. The man she despised had shown her what it truly meant to fight for others. And though she told herself he was gone, a spark of hope refused to die. Because deep in her soul, she felt it. This was not the end of Elias Kane's story. The sky was still glowing with the fire of battle. The swarm had retreated once more, their perfect unity shattered after Elias' sacrifice. The people of Serenia's world cheered, believing they had won a final victory. But Serenia did not celebrate. She stood on the balcony, her hands gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were locked on the burning wreckage above, where Elias's cruiser had vanished in the explosion. The cheers of her people echoed around her, but to her ears, they were hollow. Her chest ached with a weight she had never known. For years, she had filled her heart with hatred for humanity. But now, the human she despised had given his life for her people. The contradiction tore her apart inside. Later, in the silence of her chambers, she sat alone, her eyes burned. Though she did not let tears fall, she was a princess, strong and unyielding. But when she closed her eyes, she could still hear his last words, "Serenia, live." The council gathered in triumph, speaking of rebuilding, of victory. But Serenia did not listen. Instead, she demanded one thing. "Find his remains, search the wreckage, bring me proof." For days, search teams combed the skies, They brought back only fragments of metal, twisted steel, shattered weapons. No sign of Elias Kane. Her people began to whisper. Some said the human had been a hero. Others said he had been a fool. Serenia ignored them all. She walked the halls like a shadow, her mind consumed by questions she could not answer. Why would he sacrifice himself for those who hated him? Why did he choose her people over his own life? It was in those restless nights that Serenia began to remember her mother's word from long ago, whispered before the wars. Strength is not in hatred, my daughter. Strength is in those who fight for others, even when they are not their own. Her hatred began to crumble, piece by piece, and in its place, something unfamiliar grew, a fragile respect, a painful longing. Then, on the 7th night after the battle, when the stars were quiet and the fires had faded, a message came. A scout ship had found something drifting beyond the asteroid belt, a life pod, heavily damaged but still intact. Serenia's heart raced. She did not wait for guards or counsel. She rushed to the hangar herself. The pod was dragged in, its metal scorched, its systems broken, and inside, barely alive, was Elias Kane. He was pale, his breath shallow, but his chest still rose and fell. His body was covered in burns and wounds. Yet somehow he had survived. Serenia stepped forward slowly. Her people stared in silence. Waiting for her to speak, she knelt beside him, her hand trembling as it touched his arm. "He lives," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. Medics rushed to carry him away, working desperately to save him. Serenia followed, her eyes never leaving his face. For the first time in her life, she felt fear, not of losing a war, but of losing one man. Hours passed as the medics fought to keep him alive. Serenia stood outside the chamber, silent, motionless. Her guards whispered that it was strange to see their princess care so deeply for a human, but none dared to speak it aloud. At last, the chief medic stepped out, his voice weary. "He will live, though the scars will remain." Serenia let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Relief washed over her like light after endless darkness. When Elias finally opened his eyes, he found her sitting by his side. For once, her face was not cold or filled with anger. It was soft, almost vulnerable. "You're stubborn," he muttered weakly, his voice rough. "I told you to live, not to wait for me." Serenia's lips trembled. She wanted to answer with anger, with pride, but all she could whisper was, "I could not let you go." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Enemies no longer, but something far more complex. The hatred that had once defined her now felt like a distant shadow, replaced by a bond she could not explain. Outside, the galaxy still burned with threats. The shadows would return, stronger than ever. But Serenia knew that when they came, she would not face them alone. For now, she had seen the truth with her own eyes. One human had risked everything for her people, and in doing so, he had changed her forever. The galaxy did not rest. The shadow enemy retreated after their second defeat, but their absence felt like a storm waiting on the horizon. Serenia knew they would return, stronger, hungrier, determined to consume everything. Yet for the first time, she did not feel alone. Elias Kane was alive, his body still weak, his scars deep, but his spirit unbroken. The medics had done their work, and though he limped when he walked, his eyes burned with the same fire that had carried him through every battle. Serenia visited him often, no longer with suspicion, no longer with hatred. At first, their words were sharp, tangled in old pain, but slowly, those sharp edges softened. Their conversations grew longer, heavier with meaning. "You hated me once," Elias said one evening as they stood on the balcony overlooking the stars. "I hated all humans," Serenia corrected, her voice quiet. "But I was wrong." Elias studied her face, and now? She turned her gaze to the horizon where stars shimmered like distant fires. "Now, I know your kind is not the enemy I thought, at least, not you." Silence lingered between them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was filled with unspoken trust, fragile but real. When the council met again, voices clashed louder than ever. Some demanded Elias be sent away, claiming he was a danger. Others, especially the younger officers who had fought beside him, argued that he was proof humanity could be an ally. For the first time, Serenia did not stay silent. She rose from her chair, her voice carrying across the chamber. This man saved us when we could not save ourselves. He stood where no one else dared. He bled for us, and nearly died for us. If humanity were only monsters, then this one would never have stood at my side. Her words silenced the chamber. Even her father, who had once warned her of hatred's blindness, looked at her with pride. "Perhaps," he said softly, "you have learned the lesson I hoped you would, daughter." From that day forward, Elias was no longer seen as a prisoner, but as an honored ally. Some still whispered against him, but none dared challenge Serenia's command. Together, Serenia and Elias prepared for what was to come. They trained soldiers, built new weapons, studied the patterns of the Shadow Fleet. Every plan, every decision they made side by side. And in those long nights of preparation, something unspoken grew between them. It was not just trust, not just respect. It was something deeper, something both of them felt but neither dared to name. When the shadows finally returned, the galaxy trembled once more. Their fleets stretched across the stars, endless and merciless. But this time, Serenia's people were not the same. They had unity, they had hope, and they had a human who refused to bow to fear. The battle was fierce, louder than thunder, brighter than fire. Serenia led her flagship at the front, Elias at her side. Together, they struck at the heart of the enemy once more. And though the swarm was vast, their combined strength carved a path through the darkness. Soldiers shouted in awe as Serenia and Elias fought as one, their every move in perfect rhythm. At the height of battle, Serenia looked at Elias, and for the first time in her life, she smiled amid the chaos. He returned it, a small, tired smile, but one filled with unshaken resolve. The shadows broke that day, retreating into the void once more, battered and beaten, not destroyed, not gone, but held back by the strength of two souls who should have been enemies but had become something far greater. When the battle ended, the stars above were quiet once again. Serenia stood on the balcony of her palace, Elias beside her. The galaxy was still dangerous. The war was far from over, but she no longer carried hatred in her heart. Instead, she carried hope. She despised humanity once, the people would say in the years to come. But the human who saved her changed everything. And though Serenia never spoke it aloud, in the silence of her own heart, she knew the truth. Elias Kane had not only saved her people, he had saved her from herself. Together, they would face the darkness again, not as enemies, not even as strangers, but as allies bound by sacrifice, trust, and something far stronger than hatred.